I think here we have fundamental disagreements. I think what you're saying is completely wrong and just plays into Israeli propaganda. Hamas is the most trivial aspect, the most marginal aspect to what's going on. Israel held back on sending in troops for about 3 weeks from October 7th to October 27th for a very simple reason. The troops don't want to die. Now, you cite numbers. Where do these numbers come from? Where do these numbers come from?
But I am responding to the fact that the resistance did not surrender. And yes, it is still fighting. Otherwise, in Jabalia, the Israelis would not have casualties every single day, despite the fact that this is not the first time they try to break into Jabalia, or perhaps the first time in Jabalia camp. But they still suffering casualties every single day.
Hello and welcome to another episode of India and Global Life. If you are new to our shows, do hit that subscribe button. You can also donate in the link given in the description below, be a YouTube member by hitting the join button, or be a Patreon by following the Patreon link. That helps us sustain ourselves. But the easiest thing you can do is to watch our shows, hit like, share, and comment. Without further ado, let me welcome our guest today, Professor Norman Finkelstein and Elijah Magnier. Professor Finkelstein is the author of several books, including his most famous Gaza, An Inquest into its Martyrdom. And Elijah is a war correspondent and journalist with decades of experience in the Middle East. Professor Finkelstein and Elijah, welcome to India and Global Left.
Thank you for having us.
It has been a month since Israel's military began a renewed siege and ground assault on northern Gaza on October 5. The stated Israeli objective was to prevent Hamas fighters from regrouping there. Palestinians say the new offensives were aimed at emptying northern Gaza towns of Beit Lahia, Beit Hanon, and Jabalia refugee camp to create a buffer zone. Elijah, if we could start with you and you can share your thoughts on what has happened in Gaza in the last 13 months so as to create a background to push our conversations forward.
Well, the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, said that Israel can create more than one Netzarim corridor. And he meant by the corridor that divide the north from the south of Gaza. And this is exactly what the Israeli did at the level of Jabalia camp, dividing Jabalia camp, Jabalia city, Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, and Ashate from the rest of the north and from Gaza city. And by doing so, the Israelis are not creating a buffer zone because the buffer zone has already been created all around Gaza. But what they are doing is kind of ethnic cleansing this part of the north, forcing all the 100,000 plus inhabitants to move toward Gaza City and the area between Jabalia and the Netzarim corridor. And by systematically destroying all the houses, preventing the hospital of Kamal Adwan from operating, and preventing the humanitarian support of coming to the north, it is an indication that they are leaving no choice for the population either to leave or to stay and die, either by starvation or by the bullets of the Israeli army.
Norm, if you can respond to that, and what do you think this new offensive, or in what way this new offensive in northern Gaza fit to the larger genocidal attempt in Gaza that has been happening for the last 13 months?
I always have to preface remarks at a moment like this by saying I proudly possess no knowledge of military matters, so I don't want to pretend to any kind of authority. There probably are there probably are military considerations of the sort that were just outlined. I just don't know, but I don't really believe that that's the essence of what's going on in Gaza right now, or in northern Gaza right now, or I'm not of the opinion that's the essence of what's going on in northern Gaza. Northern Gaza doesn't exist anymore. Yes, there are people there who refuse to flee, but judging by all the information that's been disseminated, there is no northern Gaza. There's barely a southern Gaza any longer. The place is completely uninhabitable. It can never be rebuilt, or at least in my lifetime, it can't be rebuilt, or for that matter, in your lifetime, it can't be rebuilt because of the magnitude of the rubble. And even if it could be rebuilt, it's not going to be rebuilt for the very simple reason. Israel is going to block any cement from entering Gaza on the pretext that Hamas is going to use the cement to build tunnels. And that's going to become a credible pretext by Israel and the international community because of all of the claims that were disseminated about Hamas having 450 miles of tunnels in Gaza, which is a completely ridiculous claim for anybody with a jot of common sense. The New York City subway system is among the most complex subway systems in the world. And if you do a little online research, you discover we have in New York City, we have 430 miles of tunnels. Now, how could it possibly be that Gaza had 450 miles of tunnels? That's just ridiculous. Yahya Sinwar said 300 miles, and you can assume that he was already exaggerating by probably 10,000-fold. And then the Israelis started with 450, and of course the New York Times picked it up. In any case, with that pretext, just like after Operation Cast Lead, Israel didn't let in any cement to Gaza. You might recall that when the Mavi Marmara went to Gaza, it had 10,000 tons of relief aid for Gaza. Most of it was cement, because at that point, Israel was not admitting cement. It was only after the Mavi Marmara incident that they started to admit cement, and they're going to do the same thing now. So the possibility of rebuilding northern Gaza is, in my opinion, zero. Of course, I can be proven wrong, but that's my guess based on the historical record. And so then the question is, what exactly is Israel doing? And in my opinion, in order to understand what Israel is doing, you have to do what Israel does. You have to look at the United States news cycle. Now, as you know, approximately 2 or 3 months ago, I don't even remember, 2 or 3 months ago, Kamala Harris was designated the presidential candidate in the election, which is being held right now as we speak. And at that moment, Prime Minister Netanyahu, who's always attuned to the United States news cycle, actually there's been very good, and not just suggestive evidence, there's been very good, quote unquote, scientific evidence providing the exact correlation between Israeli atrocities and the news cycle in the United States. So the moment Kamala Harris was nominated president by the Democratic Party, all the entire news cycle was obsessed with the Kamala Harris-Trump election. So all the cameras were directed there at the election. And to use the expression before your generation, my generation, it was called the news story fell below the fold. And falling below the fold meant the New York Times, when you folded it, everybody saw the top, not that many people saw the bottom. And so the Gaza story fell below the fold. And therefore now Netanyahu had a free hand to do whatever he wanted, which was true. Beginning with Kamala Harris's nomination, literally, every other day there was another massacre in Gaza. Every other day. A refugee camp, burning tents, hospitals, every day, 50 people killed, 60 people killed, 100 people killed, every other day. No reaction whatsoever presidential election dominates the headlines, it disappears. And mostly, my opinion is Israel is no longer a state. It's a death cult. And Netanyahu plays to his domestic audience. They relish the massacres. I know it's a horrible thing to have to say, but it also happens to be the truth. They relish the massacres. And so if you're looking for a rational military explanation for what Israel's doing, there probably is one. I'm not going to dispute it, but it has to be understood, to use Althusserian language, that it's overdetermined by the bloodlust of this death cult society, and they enjoy the spectacle of carrying out these every other day massacres in Gaza.
Elijah, can you respond to what Norm said? And if I can just emphasize one point on that, we haven't been able to discuss a lot on the military aspect in Gaza, given most of our former previous guests do not expertise in that field. Can you tell us a little bit about the strength of Hamas, and if there are also military considerations in continuing this, what the Financial Times calls as the long campaign, quoting Netanyahu in Gaza?
Well, we understand from the very beginning of the war that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did not have a real plan for Gaza. He was hesitant in sending the army in the north and in the middle and then in Rafah. Slowly but surely, because he was confronted with a non-state actor that is closed within the biggest open air concentration camp, with weapons that are made mainly domestically and locally, he thought that it was actually not that difficult to start destroying Gaza, to teach a lesson for the Palestinians, and then develop that idea into destroying Gaza and render it absolutely impossible for anyone to return to it. And he started that in the north, from the Eretz crossing to the Netzarim corridor that is used to be called the Gaza Valley or Wadi Gaza. And this is where he pushed his troop at the first beginning, and then he pulled out the troop and then sent them back several times, and then started in the middle and saw that that is possible, and at the end ended in Rafah. But then throughout the 12 months, he used to send back his troops again to Khan Yunis in the middle and then to Jabalia. This is the fourth time he sent his troops to Jabalia, which means that, as the Israelis are telling us, the Palestinian resistance count between 40 to 60,000. And the Israelis told that they've killed between 15 to 20,000, which means still two-thirds of the troops or of the forces still active. But because non-state actors are decentralized and they don't have one leadership that control the entire strip, every single small camp or city or whatever small area it is controlled by the people who live in the area. They are the ones who are fighting against the Israelis. Now, there is no comparison between the destructive capacity and capability of the Israeli occupation forces and what Hamas and all the other 4 or 5 resistant groups have. However, it is impossible to defeat the will of the resistance and force it to submit. We haven't seen Hamas or the Islamic Jihad or any other group raising the white flag so far. We have seen the resistance using the same weapons that are dropped by the Israelis against the Israeli troops, which shows that the innovative, the experience that the resistance has in continue harassing the Israelis. There's no point in thinking they're going to defeat the Israeli army immediately in confronting it face to face. But they will harass and they will bring in the Israeli army into a quagmire inside Gaza on a very long fight. And this is something that, surprisingly, Benjamin Netanyahu accepted the casualties, showed that he can endure more than 1 or 2 months of war. It's been going on for almost 13 months now. We're coming to the month 13. And then he has no intention to stop for different reasons. But it shows also that the resistance is also fighting and is not giving up, no matter how long this war is going to take. But what Israel has managed to register, it is not a victory, it is the destruction. The Israeli army is destroying, is not winning. It's destroying the civilian, is, as Noam said, is right. Every day they used to kill between 300 to 500. Now they've reduced the number to 50 to 100 on every single day. They've tried to defeat the resistance, they failed. They went to destroy their family and kill them. Again, they failed to force the resistance to surrender. Now they move to killing civilians indiscriminately. And again, they fail because people under duress during a war, they don't surrender. They change into a different mode, into survival mode. And when the war stops, then they realize what they are left with. It's not yet the case. Now they are still in a war that it seems is not ending any soon. So from the military aspect, the Israelis now are taking bits by bits in Gaza to try and force the population. Now, because people understand they have nowhere to go, and the place where the Israelis are asking them to go is not safe, neither on the way or when they arrive. There is no food, there is no way to survive there. So they prefer to stay in their homes and try to see if they can survive or not. That is stopping the Israeli plan to ethnic cleanse completely the first part of North Gaza before moving to the second part.
No.
If you'd like me to respond. I think here we have fundamental disagreements. And again, I have to always caveat about my authority on these matters. But with all due recognition of my limitations in this aspect, I do believe two things. And I say it respectfully because I follow you, I respect you, you know what you're talking about clearly, and you have a lot of experience, which counts in these matters for sure. I think what you're saying is completely wrong and just plays into Israeli propaganda, and it facilitates, regrettably, it facilitates the genocide in Gaza. So let's start with the beginning. Number one, Israel held back on sending in troops for about 3 weeks from October 7th to October 27th for a very simple reason. It didn't want, the troops don't want to die. It's bad PR, it's bad for Netanyahu domestically, and the people don't want to die. So Israel waited 3 weeks and it pulverized Gaza. So there would be nobody there to resist as it incrementally, very slowly went into Gaza. You couldn't resist. It's like talking about resistance in Hiroshima after dropping the bomb, or resistance in Nagasaki after dropping the bomb. You can resist. There's nothing there. It's completely pulverized. I think that needs to be sunk in, or the listeners have to let that sink in. When you're talking about an intensity of bombing that was greater than Dresden, greater than Hamburg, greater than the London Blitz, then in an area that's the size of a marathon by the area I jog, it's age 70 each morning, and you have an intensity of bombing like that, how can there be resistance? It's just not sensible to believe that, in my opinion. Now, you cite numbers. Where do these numbers come from? Where do these numbers come from? You say 40,000 troops. I talked to 40,000 members of Hamas and the other armed groups. I talked to many people in Gaza. I asked them, I'm curious, people got out, I speak to them. They said to me at most 15,000. At the uppermost limit, 15,000. Okay? Now, you talk about 20,000 killed. Israel says 20,000 killed. Where does that number come from? We know exactly, or in my opinion, we know exactly where that number comes from. You know where it comes from? Israel's PR, it has to show that the ratio is always 1 to 1.5 to 1. That means 1 to 1.5 civilians to 1 Israeli, one Hamas militant killed. So if you follow, as I do, each time the Ministry of Defense the Gaza Ministry of Health, each time the Gaza Ministry of Health releases a new number, let's say it releases a number, 15,000 people killed. Immediately, Israel says, we killed 7.5 thousand Hamas militants. Or they'll say 7,000. So it's closer to 1 to 1.5. For each militant we killed, one civilian, and then what do? They go around saying, their PR people like Kemp, go around saying this is the best ratio in any war that's ever been fought. That the average ratio, they say, is 3 civilians for each militant killed, 4 civilians for each militant killed. But here it's 1 or 1.5. The numbers are completely invented. They're just PR numbers. It's completely ridiculous. If you follow the accounts, the bodies are splattered into 10,000 pieces. There's one body part on a roof, another body part in a ditch. How could they count these numbers? How is it physically possible to count these numbers? You know as well as I do, they will not go anywhere near a Hamas unit. If somebody fires at them, they send in their helicopter gunships, they fire their artillery wherever it is. They're not going near it because they don't want to die. That's the bottom line when it comes to Israeli. Israeli has no army. It has an air force, but it does not have an army. They don't want to fight. I'm not blaming them. I'm sitting safely in Brooklyn, New York, but I'm just saying it's a factual matter. They don't want to fight. So they never even get near the bodies. So how are they doing the count? Where is the count coming from? Nobody asks that basic question. Where are the numbers coming from? It's perfectly obvious where they're coming from. It's coming from Israeli public relations because they want that 1 or 1.5 to 1 ratio. So all of their PR people, their Hezbollah people can go around saying, this is the cleanest war in the world. Which brings us, the one number which I believe is accurate is the number of Israelis killed. Because that's very easy to control, or it's very easily monitored. So if you look at the number of Israelis killed, it comes to less than 1 a day. It comes to less than 1 a day since October 7th. Now, less than 1 a day is not a war. It's a genocide. And there is what I consider the most fundamental point. How do you characterize what's going on in Gaza? Is it a war where we should be applying the laws of war, the principle of distinction, in trying to understand it? Or is it a genocide in which the war aspect is completely trivial? And if you want to see the juxtaposition very clearly, you take the UN Commission of Inquiry's report on Gaza, the Navi Pillay Commission, and you juxtapose that to the South African application to the International Court of Justice. Navi Pillai's commission, it talks about the laws of war. Is Israel obeying the principle of distinction? Is Israel obeying the principle of proportionality? Is Israel obeying the principle of discrimination? The South African application, it never talks about Hamas because Hamas is the most trivial aspect, the most marginal aspect to what's going on. It's a genocide. It's the destruction of the infrastructure and the population of Gaza. And when you heighten scrutiny of the military aspect, you are facilitating the genocide by pretending, acting as if there is a war going on there. There is no war going on in Gaza, or I should say, it's a marginal aspect of what's going on in Gaza. The overwhelming fact is a genocide is unfolding in Gaza, and the war is a sideshow.
If I may answer to that. First of all, yes, it is true that the size of explosive that was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki is equivalent or even inferior to the one dropped on Gaza, without the radiation, of course. However, the people in Japan did not expect the enemy coming to drop these nuclear war weapons, but the people in Gaza expected the Israelis to come and start bombing them. This is why the resistance was not only above the ground, but also under the ground. The figures that I have offered is to condemn the Israelis with their own information. It is not to describe what kind of war unlawfully or how the Israelis perceive the resistance and what is going on in Gaza, but precisely to say that providing the information given by the Israelis, there are more than 200,000 people killed and wounded in Gaza. And if we take the Israeli numbers that are less than 10%, much less than 10% of the combatant according to the Israeli information. So I am condemning the Israeli information from the horse mouth. It is not by saying this information is correct or is wrong. Nevertheless, even with the information provided by the Israelis are not telling the truth throughout the war. First, they have a law that they have passed on in 2000 or 2002, considering the resistance as unlawful combatant, which means they have no right whatsoever. They can arrest them, they can kill them, they can starve them, they can do whatever they want without a trial, and this is exactly what they are doing. So I am not here defining every aspect of what is going on in Gaza in the way you are doing it, but I am responding to the fact that the resistance did not surrender. And yes, it is still fighting. Otherwise, in Jabalia, the Israelis would not have casualties every single day, despite the fact that this is not the first time they try to break into Jabalia, or perhaps the first time in Jabalia camp, but they still suffering casualties every single day, which means notwithstanding the quantity of explosive that fell on Gaza, that is unimaginable, the resistance is still pretty much alive.
Norm, you want to come back at it?
I think I made my point. I don't believe that the numbers have any basis in reality. The numbers are used as a pretext to justify what Israel is doing in Gaza, claiming this 1.5 civilian to combat 1.5 to 1 civilian to combatant ratio. I don't believe the numbers Israel has given and are repeated about the numerical size of Hamas and other militant groups, of their number of troops, has any basis in reality. I don't believe the numbers given for the length of the tunnels has any basis in reality. I don't believe the numbers given for the one number I think is accurate because it's so easy for Israeli journalists to monitor is the number of Israeli combatants killed. And that comes to less than one per day. Now, maybe there was some change with the recent quote unquote operation in Jabalia, though frankly, I don't believe a single word the Israelis say. If I asked the Israelis what's the weather, whatever they would say, I would still look out the window to check. It's not a joke. You have to understand, really, you have to understand Israeli society. Israeli society has an unusual degree of social solidarity. Now, yes, there are always arguments between religious and non-religious, but that sense of social solidarity in war is very impressive by the standards of any country at war. And you have to remember, every Israeli serves in the army, with marginal exceptions. So every Israeli feels this sense of identity with the army, with the cause, and what attends that is they're very free with the lying, all of them, because they all feel the sense of identity. I was just working on a chapter in the book I'm writing on the whole question of rapes, okay? So you have, in the case of the Nova Festival, so they claim that as many as 38 witnesses stepped forward to say they saw rapes and gang rapes and all this sort of stuff. It was like a bacchanalia of barbaric intercourse going on at the Nova Festival. It's rapes to the left of them, rapes to the right of them, rapes everywhere. But there's a strange fact. There isn't one visual image, not a single visual image of rape, not one. They had 5,000 photographs that they showed the Patent Commission. 50 hours of videotape. That means 2 hours for every hour of the attack of video footage. Now, from your generation, every time there's a public transgression, there are people videotaping it on their iPhones, right? That's how your youth culture operates. You have as many as 38 witnesses. They say they were lying hidden as they observed these rapes. Not one of them thought a snapshot. Not one of them. Forget about a videotape, just a snapshot to document the rape. Not one. You could say it's a wartime situation. But wait, there was tons of video footage of other atrocities committed by Hamas and other groups on that date. Israelis were taking pictures. And we know from Gaza, being in a war situation doesn't deter Israelis from videotaping, right? So how do you account for it? 38 witnesses. You know why? Because they're all liars. I'm sorry to say. That social solidarity, they're all liars. They'll say anything. So I start from, we can't trust a single word they're saying. And then I move to, these numbers make no sense. How do they count the bodies? How do they count these bodies? They say the figure was just quoted of 20,000. Where did they count 20,000? How did they count that? None of it It's all PR. And it's all PR for a much bigger purpose. The purpose is to pretend there's a war going on there. And that's where myself and your guest, I can never pronounce his last name, Magnier?
Yeah.
Elijah. I'll just go Elijah. That's where
Yeah.
Elijah and I disagree fundamentally. I don't think it's a war. I take, if we can have a choice, if we had to put it in simple terms, I take the position of the South African application. They never talk about a war. I mean, they've been faulted for not mentioning Hamas once in their application. That was correct. I think they were absolutely correct because it's a complete sideshow to what's going on. The essence is there's a genocide going on. And the moment you analyze it or depict it or portray it as a war with a resistance and all that other stuff, the moment you portray, depict, analyze it in those terms, as the Navi Pillay Commission of Inquiry did, you're completely playing into the Israeli hands because you're making it out as if the issue is Israel is not fully obeying the laws of war. No, the issue is that Israel is acting out the logic of genocide. It's not whether they are obeying the laws of war, it's that they're obeying the logic of genocide. Those are very different things. And I think there has to be absolute clarity about which, so to speak, paradigm we're using or which lens we are looking through to understand what's going on in Gaza. Those two paradigms, laws of war versus logic of genocide, are incompatible. And if you use one, you are occluding, obfuscating, obscuring the other. And that, I think, happens whether it be by UN commissions or by your analysis. I think it obscures, obfuscates, occludes the fundamental reality that what Israel decided on October 7th was no more mowings of the lawn. We are for once and for all going to solve the Gaza question. That was their determination on October 8th. Hence, all the genocidal statements, which then they had to retract, but remained operative in what was actually unfolding in Gaza.
I want to give Elijah to respond on this segment for one final time, and then we can move on to a few other things. Just to keep the viewers with us, as I see the debate, I think Elijah would agree with Norm that it's probably it's inflated, the 14,000 figures that Israel says are the militants, the Hamas fighters, as opposed to 16,000 civilians. But what Elijah is saying, as I understood, is that yeah, maybe the numbers are inflated. It's overwhelmingly civilians, but we can still think of resistance while this genocide goes on. And I think that's what Norm is saying, as I understand, is that the resistance is so trivial that by talking about resistance in this genocide, we create an impression that there is a war, and that feeds into the Israeli propaganda PR machine. So Elijah, if you can summarize or sum up your response to this fundamental debate about whether the resistance is significant enough, whether we should even be talking about resistance and agency, or whether we should talk about just genocide, and then we can move on to other segments.
Well, I don't think there are many points I disagree with Norm on. However, I take it from a different point of view. And I like to always use, of course, nobody can count the bodies, not even the Palestinians, because there are thousands under the rubble. Therefore, any figure is inaccurate. However, I have learned to take the information from the Israelis and condemn the Israelis according to the information they are releasing, accurate or non-accurate, and in all the cases, they are inaccurate. Secondly, I am very careful in using the word genocide because there is a court against the Israelis of intent of genocide. Of course, the action on the ground have all these indications, and this is why the International Court of Justice accepted the case against Israel. And because what Norm said, I fully agree, the Israelis retracted on many of what they have said because they realized that they are condemning themselves not only by their words, but also by their actions and the films of their own soldiers on the ground. So, but we're talking about two different things. Norm is talking about the what is going on and condemning what the Israelis are saying, which I fully agree with, and I am taking it from a different aspect. If this is a war, in my business, I call it a war, but there are no laws in this war because the Israelis are not respecting any law. They're not respecting international law, the Geneva Convention. They don't think even it exists or it is applicable on the Israelis, on the Palestinians, because from day one, they demonized the Palestinians. Therefore, they took away any law that can be applied in terms of war or non-war, genocide or no genocide. Even non-combatants have some protection. Schools, they need to be protected. Churches and mosques should not be bombed. United Nations buildings should not be attacked and destroyed. United Nations personnel should not be killed. European Union buildings should not be destroyed. Journalists should not be killed. So all that, are no law for the Israelis that are applicable in Gaza whatsoever. But not even that, even all the laws that are thrown in the face of the Israelis by the international community, even that they are ready to challenge and counterattack and reject any right of the Palestinian to exist. On that, I don't think there is a disagreement whatsoever.
I would just like to make one last comment, and I'm eager to hear what you have to say about Lebanon because I have many curiosities there, and you know much more than I do. The reason Israelis are not respecting the laws of war is a very simple reason, and I think that cuts to the heart of the matter again. They can't respect them because they're committing a genocide. The fundamental principle of the laws of war is the principle of distinction. Everybody knows it just means you're not allowed to target civilians. Everything in the laws of war builds on that foundational principle. If you move up, and up, it's the foundation principle is the principle of distinction. You can't target civilians, okay? Now, theoretically, you can win a war without targeting civilians. You can win a war. You can just target military objects and combatants, defeat the opposition army, and you can win the war. But hey, here's the rub. You can't win a genocide unless you kill civilians. That's the whole point of a genocide, not to attain a military victory. The whole point of a genocide is to annihilate the civilian population. So when you say Israel's not respecting the laws of war, there's a very simple reason why. Because they can't respect the laws of war and achieve their goal. Their goal is a genocide. So there, I think, again, it's critical to trying to make sense of what's going on, to what's your point of departure? Is it a genocide or is it a war that's unfolding in Gaza?
Well, I don't think it has started with a genocide because The Israelis have conducted other unlawful wars in the past, and they committed many crimes against humanity and war crimes. But this time is different. They
Totally
have
agree.
received, yeah, they have received the Americans and the European leaders and every single leader around the world, giving them the carte blanche, giving them the green light to do whatever they want with Gaza from the first beginning. And this is why they unleash all their criminal side and they behave in a way that they have never seen before. And I
My,
don't think the Israelis are the only people to be blamed, even if this is the tendency, and they have not learned from the past. They have not learned for what happened in the past, but they have carried this burden with them, applying it on the Palestinians because of the complicity of the international community.
well, there's obviously no difference. Israel couldn't breathe a single breath. It couldn't breathe a single breath without the support of the United States. The U.S. is the chief enabler of the genocide in Gaza, and that's not rhetorical. That's factual. That's written. It's imprinted on every weapon and every ammunition and every hour of every day that the U.S. is transferring to Israel. So it's not a rhetorical flourish to describe the U.S. as the enabler in chief of the genocide in Gaza. So there is no difference.
And Europe.
Well, and Europe, but Europe does whatever the U.S. says. Look, if the United States changed its position, Germany wouldn't change its position. Come on, that's not serious. You don't
Yeah,
think Schultz wouldn't do an about face the moment the U.S. changed its position? You think the Germans don't know what's going on? You think the German leadership is happy with what's going on? They're disgusting. They're morally repugnant. But if you ask me, no, Schultz is not very happy about being party to a genocide. And if the United States gave them an exit ramp, or what's an off ramp, they would jump at it. It's the U.S. That's how Professor Chomsky used to always analyze the world. And you know what? I think he was right. The more I study it, the more it becomes plain to me. Yes, it's right. The center of evil, whatever you want to call it, is in the U.S. In the case of the previous Israeli operations, which are just high-tech killing sprees, in the case of the previous, the only person who really got it right was the Goldstone report. He said the purpose of the Operation Cast Lead in 2008-9, he said it was to punish, humiliate, and terrorize the civilian population. That's the purpose of these high-tech killing sprees, to punish, humiliate, and terrorize the civilian population. That's true. So they weren't wars in the conventional sense, because the war in the conventional sense is to disable and defeat the opposing military, the opposing army. But that's not really what's been going on in the operations. The difference in the current situation is very simple. If you use the Israeli metaphor, in all the previous operations, their goal was to mow the lawn. And on October 7th, or October 8th, they revised the goal. The goal was now no longer to mow the lawn, but to extirpate, to pull out by the root every blade of grass in Gaza. That became their goal. And of course, that goal functions within the constraints of the international community, which means, of course, the White House primarily. And so limitations are put on that goal. But you could see that immediately as those limitations are relaxed, which is what happened with the presidential election cycle, the moment they're relaxed, they go mad. They go mad. Believe me, lurking, I don't want to say believe me, why should he believe me? But in my opinion, lurking in the heart of everyone in Israel's leadership and the population at heart. Lurking in the heart is the sentiment of that minister of antiquities who said early on, we should nuke Gaza. That's what they aspire to in their heart, but constraints imposed by this thing called international law and morality that puts limits on them.
I think this is a good segue to talk about Lebanon, given we have been discussing about resistance, no resistance, genocide, war, and now these debates have been fundamentally linked to Lebanon or even to Iran. So if Elijah can give us an account of what his thoughts are on Lebanon. Of course, we hear about 1 million people in Lebanon already displaced, 2,700 deaths or killings, massive power shortages, destructions of infrastructure. What is going on in Lebanon?
The Israelis, for almost 12 months, they prepared themselves for a potential war against Hezbollah and Lebanon. But they were waiting to see the outcome of the war in Gaza. When they saw that they can move most of the forces to Lebanon and they have enough supply of ammunition, because nobody can go to war without enough ammunition and a continuous supply. Even if a country has enough ammunition, this will finish in a couple of weeks. And we've seen that in 2006, after 15 days, how the Americans established an air bridge with Israel to supply it with ammunition. Exactly the same is happening now in Lebanon. And this is why we see the atrocity of the bombardment of the Israelis, because there is an abundance of ammunition that no country in the world would use against small areas to destroy it completely with the Air Force. And this is the best force that Israel has by using the Air Force. And so what they have done is they've triggered a sabotage operation, just siding more than 4,000 Hezbollah members and other medical team and many people related to Hezbollah. But then they assassinated the Secretary General. They assassinated several of the first line of leadership, and they destroyed around 6,000 warehouses and military targets, thinking that that is enough to defeat Hezbollah. And this is where they gathered five divisions along the borders: the 2010, 91 that was in Gaza, 98, 36, and 146, more or less between 70 to 80,000 troops to break into 100 to 110 kilometers along the Lebanese borders. Nevertheless, they have a problem. They've destroyed the Bekaa Valley. They've destroyed the suburb of Beirut. They've destroyed the south of Lebanon, many areas in the south of Lebanon, around 260 villages. But nobody surrendered to a jet. So they need troops to go in. And this is where the dilemma of the Israelis started, because Hezbollah is not Hamas and the other Palestinian groups. Hezbollah is equipped with laser-guided anti-tank missiles with 8-kilometer range. Therefore, the Israeli need to push the infantry or the paratroopers to try to eliminate Hezbollah and push them further away so they can push the tank divisions. This is not happening because they are still within a few hundred meters to 1.5 kilometers, depending on the area, and they did not manage to reach the Litani River that is 5 kilometers deep and 100 kilometers long, which is more or less 500 square kilometers that the Israelis want to occupy. And that is not going to help them to bring back the people to the north, because Hezbollah has rockets and missiles that can reach from beyond the Litani River anywhere in Israel. Therefore, the objective that the Israeli Prime Minister set from the very beginning to bring all the Israelis to the north, it is not achievable by military means. What he wants is to occupy part of Lebanon and start negotiate. Because he's not doing well and his army is confronted with Hezbollah, then what he's doing is doing exactly the south of Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley and the suburb of Beirut, what he has done in Gaza, start destroying one building after another, one village after another. So far, he managed to destroy around 150 buildings in Beirut, damaged almost a double, and he destroyed many villages in the south of Lebanon. But that is working again against him because the more he flattened the area, the more exposed are his tanks. So he is in a dilemma now by not being able to advance with the troops, even if he has so many men on the borders, and trying to engage with the forces that are defending south of Lebanon and not managing to reach the Litani River. And even if he reaches the Litani River, then his laterals will be exposed, and then he cannot stay in any location as a static location for his army because then he will be destroyed. This is where we are at now.
Norm, do you agree with Elijah's account in Lebanon? And perhaps I remember from one of our past interviews with you in when it came to Lebanon and the axis of resistance in general, there you were talking about stalemate, and as far as I remember, that
I was talking about, I said what? I said,
kind of a stalemate where you said that Israel cannot win in Lebanon because Hezbollah knows every veins of, I'm paraphrasing, but you said every veins of the region. So here, do you agree that the asymmetry is far less and probably it's a war?
I honestly don't know. I want to just give you a picture of how I conceived it and how reality forced me to adjust my opinions, not totally repudiate what I said in the past, but forced me to adjust. And then I'll be happy to hear Eliza's response because I am curious. I'm going to just put one question out to Eliza, which is a puzzle to me. So when he responds to me, I would like that he incorporate one point, which is a bit of, as I said, a bit of a puzzle to me. So let me just get to my question. You'll take mental note of it, and then I'll get to my understanding of the situation in Lebanon and with Hezbollah. Hezbollah in 2006, judging from all the information I was able to read, which was considerable, it located all of its military facilities and its command and control facilities away from the civilian population. It acted in accordance with the laws of war. Obviously that's not really feasible in Gaza because of the density of population, but it was feasible in Lebanon. And they said, if you read the reports, put out by the RAND Commission, the U.S. Army, there were a lot of reports. They said that Hezbollah was very careful to store its ammunition and to fire from non-civilian areas, and that its command and control was not in civilian areas. So when I first heard that at least a Hezbollah Command and Control Center was located beneath densely populated apartment dwellings in outside in South Beirut, Dahya, I was skeptical because that was not how Hezbollah conducted itself up until at least October 7th. It did not locate its military objects, to use the language of the laws of war. It did not locate its military objects, such as a command and control center, beneath civilian apartment dwellings. So as you know, when General Secretary Nasrallah was assassinated, also 300 civilians were killed because of the location, the alleged location of the Hezbollah command a Hezbollah command and control center. So that to me is a puzzle. What happened there? And I would be very curious to hear Eliza's response to that. Now, I also believe, as I've said in several interviews, I believe that Nasrallah's death was a willful act of martyrdom. It was not him stumbling into an Israeli trap. He knew full well that he was going to be assassinated. And I believe my opinion, based on nothing, I will concede, I think he, at that moment in his life, given his deep religious conviction where martyrdom plays its role, and his sheer physical exhaustion after having been the head of Hezbollah for 32 years, and a feeling of having failed his command responsibility. I will not say anything disparaging his memory because I held him and still hold him in very high regard. But I do believe it's correct to say, and it's just a human failing, it's not disparaging his memory. If you listen to his last speeches, there was an element of boastfulness to them. He said things like, Israel thinks that it knows everything going on. And then he looked into the camera and he shook his head. No, we have surprises for you. Because you might remember Prime Minister Netanyahu said, we have surprises for Lebanon. And then General Secretary Nasrallah upped the ante. He said, no, we have the last surprises for you. And as he said that, that was Act 1, Scene 1, when the walkie-talkie, the pager disaster occurred. And so I think there was a feeling on his part, pure speculation, a feeling not only that it was time for his martyrdom, because all of his comrades from over 30 years had been killed. So there was a feeling of his own martyrdom it was time for it. Secondly, allow me just to, how do you turn this off? I don't know. Okay. Secondly, it was the sheer physical exhaustion. Many people commented in his last speech how tired he looked. And thirdly, I think he felt an element of command responsibility, and the way he wanted to atone for that element of command responsibility that he failed at was to allow himself to be killed. So I don't believe it was an Israeli trap or brilliant Israeli intelligence. I think that was a decision that was made. Can you hold the tape for one moment, Jayotish? Can you hold the tape for one moment? I have to turn off this phone. I thought I succeeded, but I evidently did not. I have to find it. I don't even know where, I know. I turned it off, but it does, Okay, you can start it. So that's a separate issue where I would like to hear Eliza's opinion on that, a complete speculation. And now to return to the bigger question, I believe in retrospect that I overestimated Hezbollah's capacity to withstand and to meet the challenge posed, not just by Israeli intelligence, but by the Pentagon, by the French, German intelligence, MI, the British intelligence, the regional actors such as Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the whole of this vast conspiracy to destroy Hezbollah, I overestimated their capacity to meet that challenge. It was so overwhelming, not just numerically, how many people were working or individuals were working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to defeat Hezbollah, but also the amount of resources that they could bring to bear in defeating Hezbollah. I think that proved to be, or I should say, inflicting a major blow on Hezbollah. That discrepancy in human and material resources between all the agencies and institutions of the West, combined with the regional actors, their capacity to resist that, I think I way overestimated. I remember when I had a conversation with Professor Chomsky about Hezbollah, and I said that that Hezbollah is a significant security challenge for Israel. He was very dismissive of that idea. I thought 2006 validated my own opinion, but I think ultimately he was correct and I was mistaken about the ability of Hezbollah to withstand the challenge that was posed to it. And I do believe, not to disparage, just as a factual matter, a human failing, either General Secretary Nasrallah, either it was a psychological game he was playing when he made these boasts about we will have the last surprises, or he himself had miscalculated the balance of forces between Hezbollah and the West.
I think it's going to be quite a long explanation and delivery now that I'm going to give you and allow you to judge at the end. First of all, Hezbollah started on the 8th of October with the special forces deployed along the Lebanese borders. And then suddenly it has realized that it's conducting a new war that has never seen before against artificial intelligence and a modern army that Israel did not have in 2006. It pulled out most of the special forces and allowed only the missile units, after only a few weeks of the beginning of the war, allowed the missile units to be deployed and engage Israel only with laser-guided missiles, rocket and missiles within a limited depth So we're talking about 5 to 10 kilometers, and sometimes that has exceeded a little bit more when Israel would bomb Sidon or deep into Lebanese territory. And we're talking about the first 11 and a half months of the war. At no point the Hezbollah infantry and special forces and the 5 main units that they have, 2 deployed south of the Litani River, 1 north of the Litani River, 1 in Beirut, and 1 in the Bekaa Valley, were engaged in the war. So we're talking about tens of thousands of troops still on the side, not engaged at all during 11 and a half months. After that, the Israeli brilliant success came with the sabotage of the pager. Hezbollah did not see this coming, and nobody saw this coming. That is an intelligent operation that put on the side around 4,000 Hezbollah members or affiliated to Hezbollah or contracted by Hezbollah or those in the medical team that support the Lebanese during a war time. Therefore, the number that Israel managed to put on the side is kind of very low. I don't want to use the word insignificant in comparison to the number of the infantry and the active militant of Hezbollah. And that did not affect Hezbollah performance. What Israel did after that is they attacked the ICOM V-84, what is called the walkie-talkie, and there they made only a couple of hundred of casualties because Hezbollah dropped it immediately and understood that that also can be part of the same batch that came to Lebanon with the pager and other solar system battery, etc. And then Israel moved to assassinate the first line of command in the Jihadi Council, that are 8 in total, and managed to kill 5 to 6 only. And these are easily replaceable. And after that, it has assassinated Sayyid Nasrallah. And here I would come to the first question. Israel used, according to the Israelis, 83 tons of explosive in an area where there were 6 buildings, of which 1 belongs to Hezbollah, and under that building, more than 20 meters under the ground, the command and control center in a building that is detached from the civilian building. The underground facility was intact, actually, and Sayyid Nasrallah died only from the lack of oxygen. But all the bodies that were found with him in the command and control center were intact because the Israeli did not know exactly the location of the place. And this is why they had to destroy all the surrounding building where there are civilians. The reason why Hezbollah is in a known detached building for the command and control, because the Lebanese government consider Hezbollah as part of the army, people, and the resistance to defend the country. And because they are Shia, they live in a Shia area in the Bekaa Valley, in the south of Lebanon, and in the suburb of Beirut. They cannot go and have their offices and their command and control outside the Shia area, but they have their warehouses outside the populated area. And this is why the Israeli, for the first time, they've never done it before, are destroying the Bekaa Valley in area that have never been hit before, because this is where the main warehouses were located. However, what Israel did, Israel thought it has destroyed and defeated Hezbollah, and now it is time to finish it off. And this is why the Israeli made the mistake in moving the troops to the south of Lebanon and starting the invasion. They did not take into account that the Jihadi Council, the moment one is killed, there is his second in command and the second in command has two other second in command, so third and fourth, who can replace it. The leadership of Hezbollah is horizontal and is not vertical. One leader is removed, another is replaced immediately. Secondly, had Israel understood that it did not touch the infantry and the special forces against whom they are engaged today, and for the last 5 weeks, actually, they would have never ventured into attacking south of Lebanon, but they would have limited themselves only to bomb the villages and bomb it exactly like they've done in Gaza. So the power of Hezbollah hasn't changed. That's one. Two, the surprises that Hezbollah spoke about by the Secretary General, there are still many that have not been used. First is the Navy. We did not see the Israeli Navy in action because they are afraid of the Hezbollah surface-to-surface missile that they can hit any ship on the Mediterranean. Secondly, the war that is conducted today is forcing Israel not to carpet bomb all the residential area indiscriminately as the Israelis have done in Gaza. So Beirut is still not bombed. The Christian area of Beirut is not bombed. The north of Lebanon is not bombed. The Druze area is not bombed. There are so many other areas that are not attacked where the 1,200,000 internally displaced Lebanese can find a shelter in these areas. And this is why Hezbollah is not bombing the civilian areas in Israel. Now, the exchange of bombardment between the Israelis and Hezbollah is not to the advantage of Hezbollah because Israel has a greater firepower and can destroy many buildings when Hezbollah can destroy one or two or hit several military facilities. But Hezbollah discovered something in the last 5 weeks, that there is no need for ballistic missiles. There is a need for laser-guided missile to make sure that no tank can cross south of Lebanon. And in fact, Israel announced, and I quote what the Israelis are saying, that they have lost between killed and wounded 1,000 men in south of Lebanon in the last 4 weeks. That is not a small number confessed by the Israelis. Secondly, the problem of Israel is not daring to push the tank divisions because the paratroopers cannot occupy the south of Lebanon. They need tanks to move in, and they need tanks to protect the infantry. And they don't dare to move these tanks and put them on high ground in hills because they are afraid to be bombed and destroyed. And this is what's happening in the south of Lebanon. So Hezbollah has still many surprises because its infantry and special forces are not engaged, but in the last 4 to 5 weeks in the battle. Another point is Hezbollah discovered that with drones, it's enough to fight Israel. Why? Because the drones bring 1 million people in a shelter. As you rightly said, the Israeli society comes all together in time of war, and this time they all want Netanyahu to continue his war on Lebanon. The problem is for how long they can sustain this rhythm, for how long they can have casualties returning from the south of Lebanon without achievement, because destroying, militarily speaking and strategically, is not a military achievement. Destroying 260 villages will not bring the Israeli to the north of Israel, will keep them where they are internally displaced. But Hezbollah discovered that with drone, it can force the inhabitant of Haifa, we're talking about 1 million people, to be internally displaced. And for that, Hezbollah doesn't need ballistic missiles on precision missile to fight and fire against the dozens of Israeli military complex spread within the range of Hezbollah. So, and also the last point here is Hezbollah is fighting a war, considering that Netanyahu needs to stay in a state of war until November 2026, the time of the election in Israel. And for that, Hezbollah is using between 100 and 180 missiles and drones per day. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of missiles and drones in 2 years to be used, which means that what Israel did is destroying only what Israel knew about, warehouses above the ground, and did not really defeat and destroy Hezbollah's capability, and the war is still long. So what you said, that Hezbollah has the capability to stand and had the capability to uh, confront a long war, is absolutely right, because we see how the Israelis are failing in the south of Lebanon. And if they manage to break in, it will be to the advantage of Hezbollah, because this is when they will suffer much higher number of casualty. And this is why Herzi Halevi, the Israeli chief of staff, is hesitating to send a larger number of troops. Now, I don't think Said Nasrallah knew that his communication system was compromised. I don't think he knew that the location, the list of location of all the places of Hezbollah uh, covering the entire geography was compromised. And this is a main unit that holds all the information about the location. Hezbollah changed the line of communication now, considered that all the offices and command and control centers are compromised, and re-improvised a new one, and now is fighting its war with the political leadership complete, the military leadership complete, and the logistic supply never stopped.
Well, well, thank you for that. All of it is falling on virgin territory. I have no idea, so I'm just taking it in. I'm going to have to end this now because it's already past 11:30 and it's election day here. And I was convinced to vote for one of the third parties. So I have to do my civic duty. Obviously, the vote is not going for Mr. Trump or Ms. Harris, but there is a third party. So I was convinced to vote. So I have to head out the door. But thank you, both of you, for the opportunity. I have to go, but I'm still curious. You say that the building in which the Hezbollah command and control was located was separate from the apartment buildings. They had to have known, though, that I'm not passing a moral judgment. It's more a curiosity that they were very careful about locating all of their facilities away from the civilian population. Now you say, and there's an argument there, and I intuited myself that their constituency are the Shia of Lebanon, and they want to be among their people. And I get that. That to me makes sense. May not make legal sense, but it makes moral sense to me. On the other hand, he surely understood that by locating that facility there, he was seriously endangering the civilian population. And so it struck me as out of character, both of him personally and his organization as we know it, to do something like that. And secondly, do you agree that he chose martyrdom, or do you think it was just he was fooled?
I think he did not know that the command and control center was compromised. And I think even if we talk legally, for the sake of argument, because the Lebanese government consider Hezbollah as part of the resistance, the presence of a command and control center in that particular location or in any other location, for the Lebanese, it's legal. The illegal part is for Israel to come and bomb Lebanon, because it is not bombing Hezbollah, it's bombing the Lebanese and breaking the law and infringing the Lebanese sovereignty. So by having the command and control center among their own people and in a building known that belongs to Hezbollah, the maximum that one can think in case of war that Israel would bomb that particular building, but not drop 80 tons or 83 tons of explosive in one single area trying to kill one man. That is inconceivable. And I don't think he looked for martyrdom, although he expected to be killed one of these days, as any other leader fighting Israel, knowing how Israel behaves and is unaccountable whatever it's doing.
Okay, I don't agree, but I'm not going to pursue it. I'm listening. I want to hear the best arguments on the other side, but I can't really agree, but I'm not going to pursue it. Okay,
We'll
so
just to conclude this, we'll leave it there. As a listener to this discussion, conversation, debate, I saw it as a conversation between a war correspondent who knows strategic and tactical military landscape of the region, in dialogue with a scholar who has investigated human rights. I also saw as a listener a dialogue between an American and I hate to say this, but a Jew whose central focus perhaps is indicting his own crimes, as opposed to someone who has spent several years, perhaps decades, in the Middle East and may probably look for agency and resistance and action alongside acknowledging the genocidal crimes. We couldn't.
my main concern is truth and the pursuit of justice. Everything else is beside the point, and that's a fact. You know, there was a point in my life where being Jewish was pertinent to how I looked at it. Not at this point in my life. I take my X-ray eye when I look at documents, and I'm trying to find the truth in
We'll
pursuit of justice.
We'll leave it there. We couldn't manage to talk about Iran, also Syria and Iraq, and what it leads to our discussion when we enter these pieces into this larger question of balance of power. But maybe that's up for a round two. And if you guys liked it, please drop a comment. And if you like a round two, just drop a comment, and we will try to convince both Professor Norman Finkelstein and Elijah Magnier for a round two. Thank you so much for joining. Thanks again, Norman and Elijah.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so much.
Hi, my name is Ayushman. I, along with Jyotisman, have started this platform. In the last 2 years, we have tried to build content for the left and progressive forces. We have interviewed economists, historians, political commentators, and activists so far. If you have liked our content so far and want us to build an archive for the left, I have two requests for you. Please do consider donating for the cause. Link is in the description below. Also, if you are not able to do so, don't feel sad. You can always like our videos and share our videos to your comrades. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.